You're tuned in to More Living with Jim Brogan, broadcast live from the Brogan Financial Studios at News Talk 98.7, where old-fashioned values, expert knowledge, and genuine understanding come together to give you the retirement straight talk you deserve. Jim's a former National Advisor of the Year recipient and a financial educator, and he's here today to talk about how you can live out the best years of your life. Jim and the Brogan Financial team have been helping retirees and pre-retirees across the Southeast for over 20 years in their pursuit of financial independence. You can reach them during the week at 865-862-6800. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, because More Living with Jim Brogan starts now.
Hello, East Tennessee. Welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your ways. You listen to News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I can't tell you how excited I am about today's show. I've looked forward to this ever since we got it booked. You know, for more than 25 years, Bob Kessling has served as the voice of the Vols. If you tuned into the Lady Vols, Tennessee basketball or UT football, really going back even into the 1970s, Bob was either running the sports desk at WBR or WIVK. He was conducting halftime interviews or calling the entire game for the Vols network. Today, I'm thrilled to have him in studio to talk about one of my favorite things, Tennessee Vols sports, and his incredible career covering our hometown teams. After graduating from the University of Tennessee, he began his sports broadcasting career while he was a student in 1974 as a film editor for the Bill Battle Show, right? Is that right, Bob?
That's correct.
And his full-time broadcast career took off at WIVK in 1976. And then in 1980, he transitioned to be sports director at WBR and television and was the evening anchor for almost 20 years when he left the Vol for the Vol Network. And I remember seeing Bob on Jefferson Pilot Sports back in the 80s, early 90s.
You need to tell people, I get the guys our age know it, but the young folks don't know what Jefferson Pilot was.
They don't.
It's what is now the SEC Network.
That's exactly right.
We had those Saturday games, and basketball we had Wednesday and Saturday games. But that was the game. That was the game of the week in the SEC, and so there were a lot of eyes on those games back in those days.
Yeah, and you were on sidelines usually, I think?
Well, I started there, but I moved up into the booth. I was doing play-by-play at the end, and so did mostly play-by. I did all the play-by-play for basketball, and then got to do football as well. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun for 10 years.
That's great. Well, let's talk. I want to talk a little bit about your journey.
Okay.
Because it's just so interesting. I mean, you've been in UT sports for so long. You were part of the Tennessee football team as a walk-on fullback?
That is correct. That's how I got down to Tennessee, which is kind of an interesting story. I was an okay high school football player, like a lot of us are, and I was being recruited by some smaller schools in Ohio, like Ohio Wesleyan. They're the Battling Bishops. So that doesn't get you too far.
No, I don't think so. I've not ever heard of the Battling Bishops.
Battling Bishops of Ohio Wesleyan was where my mom went, and then Heidelberg and some other schools up there, Denison, I was getting looks at. And but, those are non-scholarship schools, so, you got to get a chance to go play, but you have to pay a lot of money. So, but I was looking at that. I wanted to play football somewhere. And one of my best friends in high school, his dad knew Ray Mears when Coach Mears was coaching at Wittenberg before he came to Tennessee to coach basketball here. And so Jeff and his dad came down here to talk to Coach Mears about him maybe walking on the basketball team or being a manager, which both happened. He walked on the freshman team and made it, and then he was a manager during the Ernie and Bernie years. So they invited me to come down here with them. I'd never been to Tennessee and wasn't even sure where it was. And so, sure, I've got nothing to do. I'll go down there with you. So we made the trip, and while they were down there talking to Coach Mears, I just wandered into the football office and asked the secretary, I said, what does it take to walk on the football team here? She says, I don't really know. You want to talk to Coach Battle, the head coach at that time? I said, well, sure. And within 5 minutes, I'm in Coach Battle's office. There's the two of us, and we're talking. And
you just walked in? Just walked in
on that. I didn't even have a piece of film or tape to even prove I played high school football or a program or anything. But Coach Battle was so great. What a gentleman he was, but he was so gracious. And after about 5 minutes of talking to him, he walked me down to the freshman running back room, and the running back coaches we had freshman football back then, and it was Kurt Watson and Don McCleary, and they put on film and showed me what the offense looked like with Condridge Holloway coming in to run the team, and that what the fullback did in the offense and all those type things, and I was mesmerized. And then they walked me back down to Coach Battle's office, and he handed me a workout sheet and said, if you can get in school, I guess he didn't think I could get in school probably, but he said, if you get in school, we'd love to have you walk on the football team. And I was stunned that, I just couldn't imagine of walking in cold calling Bo Schembechler or Woody Hayes or Bear Bryant and being treated like this. I just thought it was unbelievable. And I thought if everybody in Tennessee is like this can be a great place to live and to go to school. And so my dad was an Ohio State guy, and he was a drum major at Ohio State. So he was a big deal up there. And so, the drum major at Ohio State is almost as popular as the captain of the football team because the band is so beloved up there. And so anyway, I told my dad the story, and he goes, now, wait a minute. If you're going to walk on at a big-time school, you need to walk on at Ohio State. And I said, Dad, it's cheaper for me to go to Tennessee out of state than it is to go to Ohio State in-state. And he said, go Vols.
Oh, man.
So it's all about money, isn't it?
I guess so. And you're diehard Cincinnati Reds guy, right?
Oh, yeah, growing up in Dayton with Pete Rose and the Big Red Machine and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
So growing up in Dayton, how did you become such a big Celtics fan, Boston Celtics?
Well, Dayton had a player by the name of Hank Finkel, who was a great center back in the early 60s. So when he graduated in 66, he was drafted by the Los Angeles Lakers. Well, the Lakers and the Detroit Pistons and the Boston Celtics and the Cincinnati Royals back then played a preseason doubleheader at UD Fieldhouse. And I went to the game, and I saw the Celtics run out with those green uniforms and those black shoes, and Bill Russell was the most terrifying guy I'd ever seen in my life.
I'll bet.
And, of course, they had John Havlicek and Larry Siegfried. They went to Ohio State. And I just fell in love with the Celtics. The way they played and how good they were. And so I've been a Celtic fan ever since. I hate to admit this, but the way I remember my daughters, I have two daughters, Allison and Melissa, and the way I remember their birthdays, because they were in 1984 and 1986, the years they were born, and those were also years that the Celtics won NBA championships.
That's funny.
So I hate to admit that, but that is the way I.
Well, I have to admit, I tend to do that with my memory too. I relate it to big UT sports events.
Yeah, my wife does not like that.
That's funny
about that, but that is how I remember it for sure.
Did you know you always wanted to go in broadcasting?
No.
So when did that happen?
Well, it's interesting. I was one of the kids that you hear about at night. I'd have the transistor radio under my pillow, and I'd listen to the Reds game, and then I'd flip it over and listen to the Pirates game to see how they did, because you wanted them to lose so the Reds would move up. And then I'd flip it over and listen to Harry Carey and Jack Buck on KMOX. And then same thing in basketball. At night, I'd listen to the Dayton game and the Ohio State game, but then I'd also listen to Indiana, and I'd flip around the radio dial and listen to all these different games. There was a magic to it when you're sitting there in bed, and all of a sudden you get transformed, and you're in Assembly Hall, or you're in Rupp Arena, or one of those places. It was just there was some magic to it, and so and I played all the sports in high school, and I knew I wanted to get into sports somehow, and but I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. So I majored in public relations, because I figured if I got a PR degree, that could send me a lot of, because you do
different things.
Well, yeah, you get advertising, you get all kinds of different things in that you write and all those things. So I thought that would be a well-rounded thing for me to major in, which it was. And so one night, a bunch of us in college, one of those summer nights with nothing to do, we go over to Bill Meyer Stadium, and the Knoxville Sox back then were playing. This is like 1974. And we were going to sit in the box seats behind the Sox dugout, which were just at that time rusted folding chairs behind the dugout. And so we go down there, and we're cheering for the team and carrying on. And the usher comes down and says, you guys can't sit here. I said, why not? These are box seats. These are more expensive. I said, well, how much more expensive are they? Well, they're 50 cents more. I think the tickets were like $4, and the box seats were $4.50. Well, we were outraged. And so I go storming into the you're in college, you do dumb stuff. But I go storming into the office and think it's just horrible they won't let us sit behind the dugout. And Neil Ridley, who was the owner of the team, was in there. So I was talking to Neil Ridley. Before I left, I talked myself into a summer job working for the Knoxville Sox, putting the flag up, cooking hot dogs, taking guys to the doctor, taking the uniforms over to the laundry to get them cleaned. And so now I'm going to become the next general manager of the Chicago White Sox. That was my goal.
That was your dream.
That was my dream. I'm going to be in baseball. This is great, hanging around the guys, and I'm going to do this. And so I was getting paid $100 a week. I was working, 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week at the ballpark. I loved it, just hanging out at the ballpark. But I started writing little 30-second voicers, and I'd call into all the radio stations, including WIBK, that would answer the phone at midnight. And back then, everybody had a full-time, disc jockeys, and everybody answered the phone. So a bunch of the stations in town would carry those reports that I would do, and there were 30-second deals about, the Sox did this, and tonight they played the Savannah Braves. And out of the blue, WIBK called me and said, listen, we're looking for a part-time sports guy, and you sound pretty good on those reports. Are you interested? I said, yeah. So I was going to school, working for WIBK and working for the baseball team.
Yeah, that's funny. I've had different people on the show over the years, but hearing how things evolve, hearing Dr. Jerry Punch talk about he got into all the stuff he got into, It's just really fascinating. We're visiting with Bob Kessling. What a privilege to have him in. Has been 20 years voice of the Vols, going to be retiring. We're talking about his life. When we come back, we'll have more with Bob, so stay tuned as you listen to More Living with Jim Brogan right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back. This is More Living with Jim Brogan right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Many of you who listen to me over the years know I'm just a huge Tennessee fan. Grew up around the university. My dad worked there. And, of course, we all know about Bob Kessling. He's just been such a fixture over there for really going back 50 years. So it's just a privilege to have him in the studio as we're talking about his legacy and his journey. And, Bob, you've been the voice of the Vols since 1999, but you started as a spotter for the Vol Network in 1976?
Yeah, and that came through working with the Knoxville Sox. And so the guy, the gentleman that filmed the game and produced the Bill Battle show was Ernie Robertson. And Ernie was a big baseball fan. And so this is back in the days in minor league baseball, you had a manager, and that was it. There was no hitting coach. There was no pitching coach. There was nothing. And if you got into a slump, good luck. See if you can get out of it. If you're not getting anybody out throwing the ball, good luck. See if you can, because we don't have any,
So it sounds like me when I start slicing on the golf course.
Yeah, exactly. You're on your own. But Ernie would take his film camera over and sit behind the plate, and he would film the pitchers. And I thought that was fascinating. Then we would go over to UT, and he would show the film to the pitchers, and they could kind of see themselves. What, was their front leg bent, or was it, straight, or where was their release point? And these are things they had never seen before because there was no videotape, none of that. And I was just fascinated by that. And so I'd go over there and watch them. And Ernie suddenly turns to me and said, listen, we need a film editor on the Bill Battle show. Our guy just quit, and you played football and know something about the game. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. And so that was that, and I became the film editor on the Bill Battle show, which was a pretty sophisticated job. They would film the games, and when they'd stop the camera, it would put a flash frame on the film, and my job was to take a pair of scissors and cut the flash frame out and then glue the film back together.
That's so funny to hear those stories.
Pretty complicated. And so, but by gosh, I was going to be the best film editor in the SEC, and that's how I met John Ward, working on the coaches shows. And back then, you would, and I'd stay around and watch John and Ernie put the shows together, and I was fascinated on how they did it. And we would go over to Channel 6 at midnight, and that's when they would tape the shows. And then they would get drivers. They'd make dubs of the finished product, and they get drivers. And one would go to Nashville, Jackson, and Memphis. One would go to Chattanooga and Atlanta. One would go to the Tri-Cities.
And they drive the film.
Nashville, and they would drive the film, so they would have the Bill Battle show for Sunday afternoon. And that's, because there's no satellite, none of that back in those days. So it was pretty primitive. But that's how I met John Ward. And after a year of doing that, being the film editor, he said, "Listen, my spotter is taking another job. You played football. Can you spot?"
Everybody keeps saying, "You played football. Can you do it?"
That's right. And I said, "Well, I don't know what spotting means, but I'll do it." And so I wanted to be the best spotter. And the spotter is the guy that sits next to the play-by-play guy and kind of is his assistant. You try and point out, verify who the ball carrier was, who was in on the tackles, who might have deflected a pass, or who might have gotten a hand on the block punt. You're just kind of helping him. And you can, when you work together, you can kind of tell where he's maybe searching for who blocked the punt, that kind of stuff, and you point it on his spot chart. But I learned so much just sitting there, keeping my mouth shut and my ears open, eyes open, and learning from a master. I mean, John was just fabulous in terms of his preparation, in terms of he was a wordsmith. He was able to always, it seemed like, pick out the perfect word for the perfect situation. And I had a chance to go to to do some small college games around the area during those days. But I just decided I would learn more sitting next to John than I would be out there in the wilderness.
Well, you were mentored by the best.
Yeah. And so then that opened the door for me to do some pay-per-view games back in the days when we used to have the pay-per-view games. So I got a chance to do a few of those. Well, Jefferson Pilot was able to spot me doing those games, and then I got an opportunity to go work for them. So
one thing I'm curious, so you grow up in Dayton.
Yeah. Dad's
Ohio State all the way, right?
Yep.
You come down to Tennessee. When did your blood turn orange?
I'd say the first time I put on the orange shirt and lined up against Alabama in a freshman.
So it happened quick.
Game. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I would imagine so.
Well, the first game I went to, and I didn't get to dress for the game because freshmen back then didn't dress, but was the 72 Penn State game, the first night game at Neyland Stadium. And when that team came running through the team, I mean, it put your hair on fire. I mean, it was just it was an incredible moment. And I just knew right then this is a special place, and I'm just so very fortunate that I got a chance to play.
Now, you mentioned the PR career and how, it prepared you for so many different things because you weren't sure you're not necessarily going to go into broadcasting.
Right.
When you did, you gave John Ward your first tape.
Yeah.
What was it he said?
Well, I was doing.
Look forward to advertising.
I got a chance to do. It was really funny. When I graduated in '77, I was on my way to Nashville. I was going to go get a baseball job. I mean, still, my goal when I graduated from UT, my goal was to be the next general manager of the Chicago White Sox. So I was going to Nashville to go to the baseball meetings because they were at the Opryland Hotel, and I'm going to get a job. I'm getting ready to get married. I've got to get a job because I've got all these other jobs that I'm getting paid $25 a game to spot for John, or I'm getting paid this money for the Sox, and I'm not making any money, so I got to get a full-time job, and so I'm going to Nashville to get a baseball job, and I'm driving. I get done with my afternoon sports at WIVK, and I'm getting ready to leave. And Bobby Denton, I'll never forget it, was standing back up on Bearden Hill. He's standing out there in the front door during a news break, smoking a cigar, and says, "Hot shot, where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Nashville to get a baseball job." "What?" He said, "Listen, we just bought a station over there in Nashville, and Paul Lyle is going over there to be the sports director. Why don't you stay here and be our sports director?" "All right, I'll do that." So I stayed. So that's what got me into the radio, just because Dick Broadcasting bought a station in Nashville, opened up a job to be the sports director at WIVK, and so I took it.
When you look back, do you just kind of marvel at how that whole path just evolved into where it is now?
Jim, I have been the most fortunate guy ever in broadcasting, I think. I've never applied for a job. I've never sent in a tape. I've never sent a resume in. Lindsey Nelson told me once that you're going to get one break in the business, and are you ready for the break? Have you worked hard enough to take advantage of the break? And when you get one break, if you work hard enough, you might get another break.
Right.
So you got to keep working at it. And that was kind of my philosophy. I got started doing Jefferson Pilot. This was in '89 when the SEC basketball tournament was here at Thompson Bowling Arena. And I got a call about a week before the tournament from Jimmy Rayburn, who's the executive producer, and he says, would you like to work the SEC tournament on TV for Jefferson Pilot? I said, well, yeah. So one of our guys has been called away, and we have an opening we need a sideline guy. We need a guy to do interviews with players and coaches after the games and in between games and just be a sideline reporter. Are you interested? Well, yeah, absolutely. So the only reason I'm calling you is that Channel 10 is carrying the games. I don't have to put you up in a hotel room, pay a plane fare, or pay per diem. That's the only reason I'm calling you. And if the games are on Channel 6, I'd be calling the guy at Channel 6. Do you want to work? I said, yeah. And so I worked the tournament. I did well enough that they asked me back the next year. And then the next year I started hosting pregame shows and doing play-by-play and all that kind of stuff. So, again, it was a great break, great opportunity.
But you worked for it. You were ready for it to take advantage of it. You had laid the foundation to be able to. That's a great lesson.
Yeah, it really is. And so I felt very comfortable doing it. And when the break came, I took advantage of it. And it's just I kept hearing Lindsay in the back of my head all the time. You're going to get one break. Be ready for it.
I'll bet you did. Yeah. Now, talk about when you transitioned into being play-by-play for the Lady Vols.
That was another deal.
Was it 1978 you started
something like
with?
That, yeah, 70. I think it was 78. WIBK did not have the UT sports back then, and Bobby Dent was trying to get them. And he thought a good way to show UT that they were interested in carrying all the UT programming was to do the Lady Vol postseason tournament games. So the broadcast crew was John Ward, A.W. Davis, and myself. I got to do it because I was a sports director at WIBK. And so, of course, back then it was Pat Head, and who knew that she was going to turn into Pat Head Summit. And so anyway, we you had to have win a state tournament. So we went to UT Martin. We went over to Chapel Hill and went to Delta State to do games, and then won the championship that year. Then the next year, the WIBK was still going to carry some of the games. Well, John had figured out pretty quick that he didn't think he could do both. That's a lot of work, a lot of games. And so the Lady Vols just kind of fell into my lap. And I got started to do play-by-play. And so, here I am. I'm, just out of college, and I'm calling SEC basketball, and I think I'm a hot shot. I'm thinking this thing is pretty easy. I mean, getting to do this stuff. So we had a doubleheader one night, and it was at Stokely and they had the old broadcast ramp there in Stokely. So I had taped part of the Lady Vol game, and on the tape, and so our game is over, and John's down at the other end of the ramp, and he's getting ready to start the Vol Network broadcast. And I take my tape, and I said, Mr. Ward, would you mind critiquing my tape? He said, no, I'd be happy to do that. So he took the tape, put it in his orange briefcase, didn't hear from him. And about 2 weeks later, we had another doubleheader game. The Lady Vols played the first game, and the men played the second game. And when the Lady Vol game was over, I walked down there and said, Mr. Ward, do you have an opportunity to critique my tape? And he said, yes, I have. And he walked over, he opened up his briefcase, took the tape out, handed it to me, and he said, try advertising.
That's so funny.
And turned and walked away. And I thought, I might not be such a hot shot. This might be a little bit harder than I think it is. And that was the jolt I needed, that I need to take this pretty serious.
Yeah, grounded, you realized you got a lot of work to do.
Oh, absolutely. And so that was one of those things that was a jarring experience at the time, but it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because he just told me right then, you need to, you're nowhere near being any good at this, and you better get better.
Have you ever had a coach get frustrated with your commentary?
Not that I remember. No, because I've tried to be fair. Jack Buck, my dad and Jack Buck was a great Cardinal announcer.
Oh yeah, legend.
My dad and Jack Buck went to Ohio State together. They shared a locker in PE class.
Wow.
And so they were buddies all along. And so I got to meet him occasionally. And one time I asked him, I said, you seem to get along with the players really well. Why is that? He said, because I tell the truth. So the players might not like it. He said, in fact, I just had a scuffle with Ozzie Smith the other day because he said I was a little too critical. I said, well, I said you didn't run it out to first base. Did you run it out as hard as you could? Well, probably not. Well, that's all I said. He said, they're not going to like it, but tell the truth. And then you don't have any argument. And he also told me, treat the players on the field as if they're your own kids. Like that's your son or your daughter out there playing.
That's a good word.
Who has just dropped a pass or fouled or missed a free throw. They didn't do it on purpose, but they they did it. You need to tell the truth, but you don't need to pile on. You don't need to.
That's a great word.
Oh, yeah. Treat them like your kids who just have screwed up and they didn't mean to do it, and let's get on with it. And he said a lot of the announcers get in trouble when they pile on kids. Oh, I can't believe he dropped that again. And he also said never use the word again. He dropped a pass again. He missed a free throw again. Said never use that word. So I've tried to make sure I take that out of the vocabulary.
Oh, that's great stuff. That's Bob Kessling. We're thrilled to visit with him here on News Talk 98.7. When we come back, I want to talk to him about some of his favorite moments, some of the venues he's been to, and really talk more about his experience and his great things that he's done over the years. So stay with us. You're listening to More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back. This is More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm Jim Brogan. We're visiting with Bob Kessling, voice of the Vols for more than 25 years, and we're talking about his legacy and just his experience. It's just fascinating hearing his journey and how one thing happens after another. But what I got out of that last segment, Bob, is you'd worked hard to be prepared for that break. And then you were able to capitalize it because you put in all that work.
Well, the thing is, I didn't see it as work. I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, I loved preparing for the games. I loved going to practice. I loved being around the coaches and the players, and I still do. And that's one thing I'm going to miss the most is, spending time with Coach Barnes. And
y'all have quite a camaraderie.
He's something else. I mean, if people only knew what he was like when he's off the court compared to what he is on the court.
Well, we see a little bit of that with the way when he's cutting up with you.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I've never seen a coach, though, that is more focused and loves practice more than Rick Barnes. I mean, when he crosses that line to start practice, the funny business stops. I mean, it's all.
I've been to a couple of his practices, and it's all.
Oh yeah, it's all business, and it's not. I need you here. I don't need you 6 inches over here. I need you here. I mean, it's that much detail that goes into it, and that's why his teams play so well. But that's the one thing that I'll miss is just being around the coaches and the players, because it's fun to watch. Like a guy like Zakai Ziegler, watch him come in. And you're thinking, this guy, he's 5'9". What is Coach Barnes thinking? He can't play in the SEC.
Look at him. He might be first-team All-American this year.
He might be. So it's just fun to watch these guys come along. The Chris Lofton situation, none of us knew he was sick with cancer. And we're thinking, he doesn't have the pep in his step. He lost a little bit on his jump shot. Then you find out, he's playing through
Kept
that with
it quiet the whole senior year.
Oh yeah, it was so unbelievable, and the different coaches and their different styles. And
did you ever have a favorite player to cover?
Well, I mean, that's hard. I mean, there were so many different. They're all different, and they're special. I don't know. Hendon Hooker was, I think, one of the great stories, because here's a guy that comes in, and they recruit over him to bring in Joe Milton, and Hendon, all he did was just turn it up even higher to work harder, and when he gets his chance, takes off. So that was a great story. The Chris Lofton story was great. It was, watching Allen Houston play was tremendous, and I don't know. In football, just so many players were, back to Casey Clausen and Jason Witten and Eric Berry, and watching those guys grow up and what they're doing. And that's one of the fun things is when, like J.J. McCleskey was down at the LSU game the other night. And, J.J. was a walk-on. Nobody gave him a chance. And suddenly, not only does he play at UT and is a big star, and he goes to the NFL. Mm-hmm. And so when you see guys and then you see where their life has taken them and the success they've had, J.J. is now coaching at Tulane and having a really good career as an assistant coach in college football. It's just a lot of fun to see where the guys, when they come in, what they're like. Charles Davis was another guy. He wanted to get into broadcasting. And, Charles is so articulate and so well-spoken. And so just to help him a little bit, to make some calls for him and get him an audition here or there, and then see where Charles has gone with his career.
Look where he is now.
Yeah, and Dane Bradshaw, the same thing. I've just tried to help guys and tried to pay it forward as much as I can.
Yeah,
and that's the rewarding thing, is to see people. Courtney Lyle is another great story. She her dad was Paul Lyle, the guy who hired me here at WIVK, and then Courtney was growing up over in Brentwood, and she was doing stuff in high school, and so she comes to UT, and she works through the program there with VFL Films, and she wants to do everything, and then she graduates, and she takes a job in Macon, number 3 person in Macon, and then the sports director leaves, and so at 22 or 23 years old, suddenly she's the weekend anchor in Macon, Georgia. Then there's an opening at Channel 10, and she wants to come back up here, and I called Jeff Lee, and I said, she looks like she's about 16 years old, but she'll be the hardest working person you got on your staff. And so he hired her, and she came back here and was a reporter for WBR doing sports. And then when the SEC Plus games started, I thought, we need to get a female voice doing Lady Vol basketball on TV. And I said, well, Courtney's the perfect person. And so I said, Courtney wants you to do play-by-play for the Lady Vols on TV. Oh, I want to be a sideline reporter. I said, no, you don't. You want to do play-by-play. Well, I kind of did. Well, come over here. So we did a week of boot camp. We went Monday and Tuesday, and I was her analyst, and she was doing the play-by-play, and we're kind of talking through it, what she should look for and all those type of things. And then we did one final go-round on Thursday. And I said, well, how do you feel, Courtney? Oh, I think I'm getting this. I think I understand what I've got to do. I said, well, that's great. You got the game on Sunday. She goes, I can't. What do you mean you can't? You got everything you need right here. You've gone through this. Go to practice on Saturday, and you'll be great. She did like 4 or 5 games, and ESPN called her. So,
wow.
When you see those types, and Courtney now is a star. I mean, she's doing all the women's basketball, and she's doing beach volleyball, and she got to do some football games this year. So, but when you play a little part in somebody being able to take their career that next step, that's what's satisfying about, the business we're in, Jim. And you got the same thing. You've had people under you that you give them a little guidance and a little shove, and then you watch them take off.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been, when I think of your career, you've been to so many amazing venues and events and things like that. Let's focus on your time as the voice of the Vols.
Okay.
Is there one particular event or venue that stands out for you?
Well, for football, Notre Dame is a special place.
I went to that game in 02? 03? 02.
Yeah.
Or 01. It may have been 01.
Yeah, the dates
they run
together now. But so I was able to do well. I was spotting for John in the Miracle of South Bend game, so that was unbelievable. And but there when they beat them, and there when Notre Dame had beat them. But they're so comfortable in their own tradition. In the SEC, you go to games and everybody's yelling at each other and pointing fingers, and our traditions are better than your traditions and all that. You get involved and go to Florida and they're yelling at you and all that kind of stuff. And the LSU people come up here, we're yelling at them. So, I mean, it's just how it is in the SEC. But Notre Dame, there's none of that because they don't have to really brag about their tradition. You just look around the place. And Lindsey Nelson, again, I go back to Lindsey, and it was the 1979 game we played up there. And John Ward wanted me to get an interview with Lindsey before the game. And so I called him. He was in a phone booth in Times Square when I ran him down. And I said, well, what about doing games at Notre Dame Stadium? He said, the thing that will impress you about Notre Dame Stadium is how unimpressive it is. And when you used to walk up the old tunnel before they expanded it and put some new seats in and redid it, it was just wooden bleachers. Mm-hmm. And it was just one deck, and it was very small. And you think, and then all of a sudden you walk out on the field and it hits you. I mean, this Newt Rockne and, Joe Montana, and it just hits you, all the great players and great games. So Notre Dame, for me, has always been a very special place to do a road game.
It's funny. I went to see the Oklahoma game this year. Mm-hmm. First game in the SEC, right?
Right.
Play Tennessee, and everybody was so nice. All the fans were so nice, and I was enjoying their tradition. They were asking me about our traditions here at Tennessee, and I had a guy was like, "Man, they're awful nice. It's so friendly," and I was like, "Just give it 5 years."
Yes, 5 years. Let's beat you a couple more times and see what you think. So,
is there a? I just love intense basketball venues, and to me, I love being at a football game. I love watching a football game on TV. I love both. Basketball, I love being there.
Yeah.
Is there a particular venue outside of the Food City Center that you think that was the most intense?
Allen Fieldhouse, probably at Kansas.
Kansas.
Yeah, that was really intense. And
What's the Auburn Arena like now? They got that nice new arena.
Auburn is, in the SEC, Auburn's as tough as any place because it's only about 9,000 people, but they're right on top of you. So it's like Rupp Arena is because the fans at Kentucky love it so much. I mean, they really do, and they're very knowledgeable. When you can beat them up there, that's pretty special. It's hard to do. I mean, it's really hard to beat them up there. I don't care what their team is like; it's still hard to beat them. So that's a satisfying place to win games at. The new Texas arena is really nice, but it wasn't very loud because they didn't have a lot of people there for this game. But all these places have upgraded their. Ole Miss has got a great arena. We'll get to see that coming up. So,
in terms of postseason, is there something that stands out either in football or basketball?
Postseason,
in terms of just the experience in an Elite Eight or.
Yeah, unfortunately, most of our experiences in the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight,
they've not been great.
Not been great. So, that's one thing I'd love to get to a Final Four.
Maybe you get there this year.
Yeah, I hope so. They've got a shot at it.
They do. I think so.
And I just hope that Coach Barnes and the team can stay healthy. And if they stay healthy and Chaz Lanier can put up 20, 25 points a game, they're going to be a tough team to beat.
Now, we were talking earlier about the Lady Vols and about what it was like back in the 70s, and then you fast forward. Tell me your thoughts of Kim Caldwell.
I've been very impressed. Her style is different. It's a high-energy style, and I think teams are going to maybe adjust to it a little bit, and it's going to be tougher sledding. But the one thing that she has done is she's come in and gotten these young ladies into tremendous shape, and her goal is not to win it in the first quarter or the second quarter. Her goal is to beat you down in the fourth quarter and win. And I think it's a system where when she recruits her type players, this was kind of a mixture of her players and also ones left over from Kelly Harper's team. When she gets her own players in there that will play her own style, I think it's going to be pretty fun to watch. I mean, it already is fun to watch. It's they're hectic and chaotic and running all over the place and jumping and putting up three-pointers and stealing the ball.
From my vantage point, do you think it's re-energized the Lady Vol fan base?
Oh, I think, winning does that.
Yeah.
Winning does that. And I think nothing re-energizes this place more than beating Connecticut. So,
that was amazing.
Yeah, and playing LSU tough and South Carolina tough. So she seems to know what she's doing, and I think her players. The one thing you like about her players seem to respond to her, and they play for her, and I think that's a big thing.
What are your thoughts on what Tony Vitello's done for Tennessee baseball and for Tennessee in general?
It's unbelievable.
It is.
I mean, it really is.
We were like, for years, just couldn't even make this SEC tournament.
I know. And he is, I think, he's got a tremendous staff. Frank Anderson, his pitching coach, is as good as anybody in the country. And as Jim, we all know, baseball is about 80% pitching. You better have some pitching. And they've got great pitching, and they have every single year. But Tony just seems to be a great evaluator of talent. And then when he gets talent, he's able then to develop that talent. And that's a key. A lot of these teams have great talent, but the guys don't get much better between their freshman year and their junior year. Well, that's not the case with Tony's guys. They get better every single year. And I just think he's a great coach. He's a great ambassador, and he's a tremendous salesman. So.
He is. And one thing I love is, you see him in a press conference or something. He was asked about Nick Saban's rat poison comment or whatever he's asked about, and then he's asked about Tennessee, and he'll just go off about how great Tennessee is and it just being the experience. And I'm like, man,
he's selling.
That is my guy.
Yeah, he's selling all the time.
That is my guy.
And they win.
Yeah.
All that's great. If you lose, people still get a little upset with you. But he wins, and he wins at a high level, and it's an exciting brand of baseball, and I think he's a great baseball coach.
We're visiting with Bob Kessling. When we come back, what is next for Bob? And I kind of want to hear a little bit about that and about his decision to transition into the next phase of his life. So stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI, and we're visiting with voice of the Vols and really legend Bob Kessling. What a privilege, as this is his last year as voice of the Vols. One thing I do want to cover before we talk about what's next for you, Bob, is when you got the job to be voice of the Vols, talk about what your travel through the state. I think that's fascinating to read that you did what you did.
Yeah, I thought it was important. You know, I think most places in the state knew who I was because of the Jefferson Pilot, because being on the Vol Network and all of that. So most people knew who I was. But I decided I needed to go and visit every single radio station. And so I took off. It took me about 3 weeks, and I drove and went on the back road, then stayed off the interstate, went on the back roads, and just really found out a lot about the state of Tennessee. And I'd go to these different places, Pulaski and all these at Savannah, and I'd speak at a civic club, or I'd go out and meet advertisers. And it was just a great experience for me to meet the people across the state. And when you do that, you find out, you know, it really is three different divisions. I mean, Middle Tennessee is different from West Tennessee, and West Tennessee is different from East Tennessee. But it was one of the greatest things I ever did, and I just thought it was special for me to get the chance to meet all the radio stations. And,
yeah, you went to over 85 radio stations.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it was amazing, but it was a lot of fun, and I met a lot of great people.
Yeah, I think it's cool that you did that. You know, not everyone gets to do a career that they love. Mm-hmm. What would you tell young people today, starting out or graduating, or even some of those that are somewhat into their career?
Yeah, I'll do the same thing that Lindsay told me: work hard, because you never know what door's going to open. If you every single day that you get up. When I was at Channel 10, I got up every morning about 9 o'clock, and my goal that day was to beat Channel 6 and Channel 8. That was my goal every day. And I think that's how you have to, you know, some days I did it, some days I didn't, but that was the goal every single day. When you get up, be motivated to make something happen and work hard, and I tried to do that. So I think that a lot of people in college, you know, I speak to broadcasting classes a lot, and I tell them there's so many different paths you can take in this business. Don't just get focused on one, because you might think that you're going down that path and this one opens up, and it might be totally different. Your career will be totally different.
Look at your journey as a perfect example.
Yeah, exactly. So just get up every day and have a good attitude about it, and go out and try and get better every single day.
Yeah, when I talk to over at the University of Tennessee and have an opportunity to talk to undergraduate students in the College of Finance, the two things I always say is whatever you're doing in the moment, pursue it, give it passion, and pursue excellence. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not what you eventually want to do, do it with passion and pursue excellence.
Exactly. If you're making hamburgers at McDonald's to pay the bills, be the best hamburger maker that you can that day. I mean, the best.
Absolutely.
Be the best in Knoxville.
Because if you do that, though, people notice, and you'll get your opportunity just like you did with your break. You were prepared for it.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
Now, you're very active in the community, Bob, serving on the board. You're on the board of directors for Goodwill, the Leukemia and Leukemia Society, and the Knoxville Sports Hall of Fame. So you're journeying into retirement.
Yeah.
What are your plans?
To be honest with you, I've been so busy working, because my schedule hasn't changed since we made this announcement back in the fall, because still getting ready for basketball games and still doing all the shows and everything we got to do. So I haven't really focused that much. I have had a lot of calls from people. I like to do more charitable work with Goodwill. There's a couple of things there. The YMCA is called. I've got a great background with the YMCA, so there's some things there. So I don't really know. I don't envision myself doing any more broadcasting, but you never know. And I know I don't want to get into anything that's full-time. I've been traveling or doing games every weekend since 1974.
That's a long time.
That's a long time. And so now I got grandkids. And, for example, last week, where you're down in College Station and your grandkids have a couple of basketball games that morning that you're missing. And you're thinking, I just don't want to miss them anymore.
I don't blame you for that.
Yeah,
that's a great word.
Yeah, so we got another grandkid coming in April, so we'll have 5 grandkids, and that'll keep me busy, so I'll do that. But I'll find something, but I don't know what it is just yet. But
that's great. I'll
get some opportunities to do some things.
That's Tennessee legend, voice of the Vols, Bob Kessling. Has been around UT sports for over 50 years since you walked on the football team. Thank you so much for taking. I can't tell you what a pleasure it was to visit with you this morning and taking time out of your busy schedule.
Thanks, Jim. Good to see you.
That's Bob Kessling, voice of the Vols. It'd be great listening. I hope he gets his first Final Four coverage this year. We were talking about that off air. I hope you get your first Final Four.
I'm for that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jenna, for engineering the show. Thank you to Jill for helping produce the show. Check us out online, broganfinancial.com. We've got our class coming up. Tax planning for retirement at Pellissippi State Community College here at the end of March. You can go to PellissippiPlanning.com. PellissippiTaxPlanning.com. Thank you for tuning in. This is More Living with Jim Brogan on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
The views expressed by Jim Brogan and his guests are not that of Cumulus Media. Any discussion of financial, legal, and tax planning strategies is not intended to be individualized advice and is general in nature. Always consult with your advisor for advice specific to your needs. This program's content does not represent a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment by Jim Brogan or Brogan Financial Incorporated.